Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today to the AAPI panel. We have such amazing guests that will be introducing each other in quite a bit. But before we get started, if you'd like to stay up to date on Wonsulting events and live streams, please head over to wonsulting.com to sign up for a newsletter so you don't miss out on anything. And now we'll go ahead and have each guest introduce themselves a little bit and give a quick introduction to the audience. And Harpreet, if you wanted to go first, and then Vikram, and then Jonathan and Jerry.
Sure, I can go. I can do that. I am Harpreet Kaur. Harpreet Kaur means always smiling, or her means guru as well. And so, if you see me smiling, that's my name, part of my name as well. And Kaur means the princess, and you can see my title, the Kaur Princess. That's what Jonathan generally calls me. So I'm like, it's better to get in the title as well. I am a mom of two. The nutty kids, and a wife and a technical leader at Microsoft. I am super excited to be here, and more to come about me as an Asian leader as well in the session. So with that, I'll Vikram.
Awesome, thanks, Harpreet. Hey everybody, my name is Vikram. I currently work at Google, focused on operations, and have been at Google for a bit over a year. Prior to this was at a startup. Prior to that was at Facebook for a good amount of time. And even before that was in management consulting. Excited to be here. Excited to talk about being an AAPI leader. Obviously, a lot going on in the world right now as an Asian American specifically. And I know we're going to get into a lot of that. Similar to Harpreet, I'm a father of one. I haven't gone to the second level yet, as Harpreet is already there, but we'll see what's to come. And I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to chat with everybody on the line.
Thank you so much for both introducing yourself. And now, Jonathan and Jerry, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves as well.
Cool. Well, hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here. By the way, for everyone tuning in, let us know where you all are tuning in from in the chat. We want to see where all of you are in the world. But a little bit about me. I'm Jerry. I'm co-founder, COO of Wonsulting. And how I know these lovely people is I cross paths with Vikram at Google, and I met Harpreet over LinkedIn. And so this has been a crazy, crazy world, crazy, crazy times. And I can't wait to talk with you all about what it means to be in the AAPI community. With that, I pass it over to John.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry, Vikram, and Harpreet for being here, especially on a Thursday evening. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I'm Jonathan, the CEO of Wonsulting. As you all may know, our mission turned underdogs into winners. Yeah, super excited to be on this panel today to speak about AAPI and also, showing in regards to our experience being Asian leaders and hopefully inspiring more of you to, be vocal and getting to your careers. So I'll hand it back off to Isabel.
Thank you all so much. And for those who don't know me, my name is Isabelle Lee. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently the partnerships lead here at Wonsulting. We have an amazing panel of amazing AAPI leaders, and we're so excited to go ahead and get started. Before we start with the question and answer portion, we'll go ahead and have a couple of topics we'd love for you all to touch upon, and anyone can go first in any specific order. But our first topic is we'd love to hear your journey as an AAPI leader and how you've been able to navigate the workplace, especially as an Asian American, and feel free to share as many experiences as you're comfortable sharing as well.
I can kick us off. This is actually very interesting because this is actually something I learned from Vikram. Vikram, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember one of the things that I've learned in my career was that I was sort of ingrained of always apologizing for nothing. I remember when Vikram and I first crossed paths, I was like, oh, sorry about that. Let me get this to you sooner. And Vikram looked at me and was like, why did you just say sorry? Like, you don't have to say sorry in these type of situations. But that made me realize, why did I say sorry? Why am I apologizing? And I sort of reflected on that a little bit. And I came to the realization that I feel like it really just stems from my culture, right? in sort of the Korean American, in sort of the Korean culture, you're sort of ingrained that if you make a mistake or something isn't perfect, that you apologize right away and fix it right away, right? But I feel like in corporate America, that really isn't always the best way to sort of present yourself as someone who constantly is apologizing. Rather, the best way to handle it, at least from what I've seen, is just being very positive about it, right? And just saying, hey, thanks for your flexibility, thanks for understanding, rather than saying, hey, I'm sorry about this document or whatever. And so that's one of the things I've learned, is that my Asian culture doesn't always mesh well with sort of what the stereotypical definition of a leader is in corporate America, and then trying to figure out, well, how can I bring my true authentic self to the workplace while sort of having this like dichotomy of, I guess, personalities, sort of what I've learned so far.
And I can add to it. I'll be honest, right? Like let's first of all, Jerry said it very. He said it greatly, right? Always apologizing. One of the things growing up in India, and just as I said, I didn't do a big intro for myself. I was born and brought up in India. I actually did my master's in computers in India. I came here for a job through my company as a consultant, and then I'm here, right? My kids are American, and we are American. Let's just say that. But in the end, as Jerry says, always kind of saying, oh, I'm sorry. How do you change the narrative? It's a very fine balance. You sometimes as a leader, you do have to, be ready to apologize if something's gone wrong, right? To help your team. But at the end, like for example, if I'm late for a meeting, right? But I was already doing a decision making in another meeting. So if I'm late, so if they're waiting, so instead of saying, sorry, I'm late, I will say, thank you for waiting, right? So thank you for waiting for me. So you're kind of subtly changing that. And again, for all the folks who are, coming from different sides, just this morning example, right? We were talking about, there is a code name we are using, and it has a Z in the end. And there was a conversation about, are we calling it Z versus Z? Right? All the Canadians and the British people like us. And I'm like, let's just go with Z. But I know I generally call it Z as well. Elevator versus lift, right? Taxi versus cab. Or we can go on and on. So as we kind of move on and we kind of ingrain ourselves in the American culture, one of the things I want to make sure is what we are doing is we're not losing our own ethnicity. We are not losing our own uniqueness. Right. So keep that in mind as well as you're trying to mingle in the corporate world. Yes, rather than another joke about Asian is always saying, wobbly head. This is like not even yes or no. Right. Be very, very clear about what you're saying. Is it a no versus a yes or a maybe? If it's a maybe, it's just say maybe. This doesn't mean anything, right? So kind of, I had to learn it on the go. Let's be honest, right? Am I there yet? No, but that's okay. It's a journey. It's not a destination. It's a journey. I hope that helps as well.
I totally agree, and I think to your point, it's about being adaptable and to some extent bringing your authenticity with you while also recognizing who your audience is. If I were to take a step back, I know that the prompt is somewhat broad, but if I think of myself as an Asian American, it's kind of the best of times, and in other ways the worst of times in a weird way. When I say it's the best of times, when I was growing up, when I was in college, I didn't have a lot of reference points for Asian CEOs. But if I look at, Harpreet and I, we work at organizations where that has become the norm over essentially the last 10 years. Google and Microsoft. Obviously, both of those leaders come from India. But if you think about the broader Asian community, the CEO of Zoom, which had a huge IPO last year, an Asian CEO and founder. CEO of DoorDash, in Asian, not an Asian American, I don't think, but an Asian founder and CEO as well, took that company public. We have a lot more reference points today to point to and say, look, if that person can do it, then it's possible. And by the way, it's not just in tech. If you look at, Pepsi, if you look at credit card companies, these more sort of like traditional companies, the same trend is happening there. But the reality is, it's also the worst of times when we see what's going on in the news, and we see sort of violent crimes committed, some seemingly just kind of randomly towards the Asian community. And so it is, it's this weird dichotomy that we're going through, where we're sort of proud to see so many great leaders, but we also are sort of rooted in the fact that these barriers still exist, and in some ways you are still viewed as an outsider. You're not always fully sort of whole in the workplace or just in the communities we live in. But I try and take an optimistic approach, and one thing I've learned about just through my career is that the workplace itself is getting more inclusive, and those workplaces that are not inclusive are quickly realizing that their talent pool that they can choose from is shrinking. And so that's what keeps me optimistic. That's what keeps me going. And if I look at the stodgy sort of consulting firms I work at, and see the talent that they're drawing from today, just either whether it's through LinkedIn or otherwise, like I remain very, very optimistic about how inclusive the world is getting and how inclusive the workplace is getting. So I'll pause there and turn it over to someone else. But it's just kind of like an interesting time as an Asian leader.
I agree, Vikram. Yeah, I still remember when I was trying to get in my career, and I remember when I was working in corporate. I come from a Filipino background. If anybody here is Filipino, definitely shout out to you in the chat. But yeah, I still remember joining a lot of different corporate companies, and I remember I couldn't find anybody who was Filipino, and everyone would always categorize me as, like, of course, Asian, but there's so little Filipinos, especially in the tech industry. And I was always thinking to myself, yeah, where is everybody, right? Like, where is my tribe, as they like to say, right? But I realized, like someone said in the chat about ERGs, the ERGs, the employee resource groups, especially for a lot of these big corporate companies, that's where you find a lot of the different folks who come from very similar backgrounds, who share different similar cultures to you. That's where actually, for me personally, I was able to like get my voice out, because I remember I'd be so scared to like when I was like because I was so entry level working in different companies. I'd be so scared to even say anything, because I was like, oh my gosh, like someone's gonna judge me, or I don't think they're gonna listen to me. But those employee resource groups are the ones that like helped educate me in regards to background I came from. So yeah, that's how my experience has been in corporate. And I've actually been trying to get even closer to my own culture too as well. Actually, throughout the past year, I've actually been learning Tagalog. So if anybody knows Tagalog, shout out to you too as well. Salamat means thank you. There you go. There's your first word in Tagalog if no one knows. Salamat.
And I know a lot of you, as you've been talking about your journey as an Asian American navigating the workspace, I know you've mentioned a lot of stories from your past, and I'd love to hear if there was anything you wish you knew when you were younger, anything you wish you could tell to the audience who might be filled with Asian American youth or youth in general, if there's anything you wish you could tell them about just like your own experience or just about anything that you wish you first knew.
I would say embrace your diversity is extremely important. I think a lot of people, it's like, because you're a minority, you feel like you have to take a step back and be in the shadows. 100% you don't. I think that when we talk about networking at Wonsulting, right, and we talk about how do you reach out to people, how do you find a common ground with people, I think one of the most important aspects of it is, of course, we talk about similar universities, similar organizations, but why not similar ethnicities? Why not similar identities? That's what, like, for me, when I was like networking with so many different people, I would always find like the Filipinos in tech, right? And I network with them, and I would like speak some Tagalog. I didn't know too much Tagalog, right? But I learned it, right? Jerry's laughing at me because I've been speaking to it to him, and he doesn't know what I'm saying. But the thing is, like, yeah, like embrace your diversity, everybody. There's so many different organizations out there that you can join that will help you get to where you want to be. And like Vikram said, there's a lot of diversity and inclusion that's improving, especially for a lot of these companies. So like when I was in school, I was actually very involved with ALPHA, the Association of Latino Professionals for America, where there's a lot of different minorities and underrepresented backgrounds there. But it ultimately helped me learn more about what I wanted to do in my career. And that's actually the organization that honestly changed my life. And I wouldn't be where I am today without that organization. So for everybody out there who's scared about sharing their voice or even speaking up, speak up. You should listen to Harpreet's favorite message. I will not say it. Harpreet, you will probably say it. Your token slogan. I'll let you actually say it, but you'll hear it. It's a great slogan for sure.
So I think it's a great addition to what Jonathan just said. Embrace your uniqueness, embrace your your ethnicity, embrace your background, because guess what? Why blend in when you're born to stand out, right? That's my slogan. And I'll be honest. If you go in an interview, and if you're one of the same, why would they hire you? Show your different perspective, right? When I say it took me 30 years, folks, to one of the Isabel just asked that question. So going back to it, what is the one thing which I would change? I would stop blending in. I would stop trying to fit myself into a box. You don't need to. Show them what you've got, right? Each one of you may not be feeling that, but I will tell you, if you look deep, there is something different. There is a reason. There are hundreds, and Harpreet Kaur is a very, very common name in India. Actually, it's a unisex name. So you may even hear Harpreet Singhs or Harpreet, So how is this Harpreet Kaur different than others? How is this Vikram different than other? Vikram is a very popular name, right? How is Jonathan? How is Jerry? So find that in you. No need to be same like, the other leader. Be your own leader. Be your own type of leader. Yes, there are frameworks you need to follow. I'm proud of who I am. Not going into too much detail because I see amazing questions which we should tackle about the Asian community issues which we are seeing in the environment right now or in the society now. But look at me, right? Like I'm proud of who I am. People are going to make assumptions? Sure, let them go ahead and make assumptions. I will tell you, when 4 of us, my husband, my son, my daughter, who also she's a little one, she wears a turban as well, and my husband, we go out, people will make assumptions. They will like, what kind of family is that, right? They don't know we are product leaders or we are tech leaders. My husband was a leader at Microsoft. He's at a different company now. They don't know. Right? Like people are always going to make assumptions about you. So why are you trying to fit in? Right? You be proud of who you are and go from there.
Awesome. So as soon as Jonathan said it, I was like, shoot, Jonathan stole my response. So I'll give a different one, sort of like a secondary answer, but something more just for everybody to think about. So first of all, I'll say just to like giant plus one on the point, when we're young, I remember like in high school and college, you're doing everything to fit in. And then the older you get, the more you realize you actually really want to stand out. That is actually what helps you in your career. So just like a giant plus one to that. And sort of like embracing your individuality and sort of like your authentic self, it takes you places and people recognize that and they gravitate towards it. I think, if I were to sort of challenge ourselves as a broad Asian community, I know it's a very large umbrella and folks in the comments are rightfully pointing out that can sometimes inflate stats. But we need to seriously think about risk taking in our careers as an Asian community. When I was growing up, my mom would have loved for me to be a university professor. Okay. She pushed and pushed and pushed. I got into MIT and I went to MIT for business school. And my mom, after graduating, still says, well, maybe you can be a university professor one day. Okay. So, and that's great advice. But if you're a university professor, you're starting your career in your early 30s in a lot of ways, right? If you're in tech, you are potentially exiting a company, you're middle management. It's a totally different ball game. And I know like we really do need to challenge ourselves as an Asian community and say, why aren't we taking more risks? And especially as a first generation Asian American, the biggest risk that was taken and the biggest lottery was really my parents getting to the United States. And so for me to look at my career and go to, for management consulting and whatnot, the risk that I could take compared to that is just so much smaller. And the fact of the matter is that in the United States, at least, the gains go to the risk takers. It's just the fact. That's just how it works, unfortunately. And that doesn't mean quit what you're doing and start a company or drop out of school. That's not what that means. You can take very calculated risks. It could mean, going, to a smaller company. It could mean going to a bigger company in a lateral role. It could mean a variety of things, but really challenge yourself as an Asian community about like what risks you're honestly taking, and are you taking the traditional path versus not. Really quickly, because I see just so many great comments that I'm just so afraid we're not going to get to on ERGs or communities. If you work in an industry like oil, gas, which I would, maybe categorize as more traditional, think it more, one advice or advice that was given to me was think more broadly about, professional networks that may not necessarily be, specific to oil and gas, but there's a lot of foundation works or like networking opportunities where you'll be able to sort of network with people that may not be in your immediate industry of choice, but are actually a very powerful network to have and could include professionals from across a variety of industries. Keep in mind, a network, it's good to have a broad network of loose connections than a small network of deep connections. So I would just urge you to think more broadly if you're kind of afraid to start an ERG within like your current company or whatnot. There's so many great questions, guys. I'm concerned we're not going to get up to all of them, but I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, I mean, all these thoughts are so great. And when you asked this question, Isabel, it sort of made me think back to, I guess, when I first realized I sort of pushed off my culture, and also to the point where I started accepting my culture. Right? I remember in high school, throughout my entire, I guess, adolescent years, I very much grew up in a very homogenous community where I only hung out with people who looked like me, talked like me, had very similar backgrounds as me. And as soon as I got into college, I moved into a dorm room and I was in a triple. The two other roommates one of them was African American, the other one was Caucasian. So I was like, oh my gosh, I am not going to be able to make friends. Like, this is not what I'm used to, right? But one of the beautiful things about just meeting people and learning about people, learning about different cultures, is that one of those guys actually ended up being my roommate for the next 4 years and is one of my best friends today, right? And at that point, I think one of the things that it made me realize was I sort of assumed that when I got into college that different cultures meant that we would not be able to get along because we had nothing in common, right? But the more I sort of began to understand that, hey, culture is sort of what makes us different and what makes us very unique. And the uniqueness is sort of, Vikram was mentioning, and what everyone else is talking about, uniqueness is sort of what makes you special and what makes people want to come and talk to you, right? I think that's one of the things I've learned throughout my college experiences is very much is something I embrace now, because when I was in high school, everyone looked at me and they would go, oh, that's a Korean guy. But when Korean people would look at me, they'd go, oh, that's an American guy, because they very much see me as an American. So I always assumed, well, I don't really know what I am, so I'm just going to just be sort of in this mid spot where I'm neither. I'm a Korean American, right? And I think that sort of dichotomy for me growing up was very conflicting battle, because I didn't know what side to sort of rely on. But the more I sort of learned about culture and a little bit about the culture that was instilled into me to become who I am today, it sort of made me realize, hey, I'm actually so grateful to be operating in this mindset, because I do think that it's very different than what you might find somewhere else. But I think that's what made me special, and I think that's what made me unique.
These are all amazing answers. And I know that one of the topics we really wanted to touch upon in the AAPI panel was with the recent rise of Asian or anti-hate crimes against Asian Americans. And I'd love to hear, how has that been impacting your mental health? And also, as Asian Americans, what do you think allies can do to help? And then we'll go ahead and definitely move on to the Q&A portion as well.
Yeah, I think, when I first heard about it, I called my my mom and dad and made sure that they were okay. And especially my Lolo, because my Lolo is almost 90 years old, right? It's unfortunate a lot of these circumstances have been happening throughout the world and throughout the United States, especially. One thing, though, yeah, like it's tough, honestly. Like when I first heard about it, I remember, like, I honestly, like, when I first heard about it, like, no one even said anything to me about it, right? I had about 1 or 2 friends that checked up on me, but I was actually usually the one checking up on other people. So what I say to people, especially for allies and for those who are checking in, especially with the Asian folks in their communities, definitely check up on your friends, especially who come from not only Asian backgrounds, but other backgrounds too as well, whether you see it, the different things that are occurring within the news, or just a lot of the different hate crimes that are happening in the world. Just check up on your friends. It just shows that, life is extremely fragile, and it's always good to stay in touch with people. That made me realize, like, honestly, after, I was like, I got to stay in touch with my friends. I got to stay in touch with my family more often. And I don't know if anybody else has felt that in the comments too as well. Like, it's just unfortunate. But the one thing is, it's good that a lot of the voices are being amplified now. It's better late than never. That's what I like to say all the time. So as long as we're able to amplify even more voices and get our voices heard more out there, such as with this panel with these amazing guests, that's what really matters.
Yeah, and I will add to what Jonathan just said. Yes, we are getting a lot of hate for Asian Americans. I think allyship it's a journey again. Right? At Microsoft, we have our own model of allyship as well, right? Are you being a performative allyship, or are you ally to one, to group, to to all? So think about that. When 9/11 happened, and still there were a lot of Sikhs which were impacted because of mistaken identity. Our Black community has been impacted. What we are hearing in the world is crazy. The coronavirus in India, it's crazy, right? What's happening to us because of all the wrong social media impact about some political leaders, which have said that Asians are the one who got it. And that is why you see all the hate which is getting towards us. So, I would say there are 3 ways which I think about it. First of all, what you can do as an individual. Stand up for the bullies, right? Learn, first of all, acknowledge that this is happening, right? As Jonathan said, check on your friends, your Asian friends, your minority friends, your Black friends, your, other ethnicity friends, because it's not just, the world is in a crazy place. Then how can you amplify? Interestingly enough, I'll share, I didn't know much about it. Now I'm an ally to Black at Microsoft and others as well. When everyone started putting that black box on Instagram, that it went viral, if you recall, like few months back. I put that too. Then I said, Harpreet, what are you just doing, right? Yes, 2,000, 3,000. I don't have as much following as these two folks, Jeremy and Jonathan. But, at least they will see it. But then what can I do more? I learn more and then amplify those stories, right? And then to make sure everybody is getting learning and actually amplifying. So you can actually acknowledge that there is a problem. You can act on it, and then you can amplify, right? So as an individual also, you can do that. And then it starts as an individual, but then, if you want to take the lead as well, there are multiple other ways you can, either give back financially, give back your time, give back your, but make sure we are not being a bystander. Gone are the days. We've got the power of digital world to amplify, to help out as well. So let's do that as well in a positive way to help, right? That would be my additions. Anything to add, Jonathan, Jerry, Isabel?
I forgot to add something too as well. That's such great points, Harpreet. Thank you so much for bringing it up. One thing as well is like, if you also identify as Asian or you come from Asian backgrounds, like I see a lot of Asian on social media, like a lot of people like Asians putting down other Asians. Like definitely bring each other up together, right?
Exactly.
Like I've seen it a ton, right? So we're in this together, like honestly, our Asian community. So let's be strong together, and honestly, not push ourselves down in the dumps, but instead keep bringing each other up.
And Harpreet, I think you mentioned a really great point about how African Americans, and especially those who identify as Black, have continuously throughout history been affected by hate crimes. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, is even though there have been a recent rise of Asian American hate crimes, for the longest time, African Americans and Black folks have experienced this through so long. And I think that's an important point to bring up. And I just wanted to thank you for that.
You're welcome. So welcome.
That's great. I mean, not much to add to what Harpreet said. I mean, I think it's to your point, it's time to be a protagonist in this situation, and think of ways you can lead in a certain way. I mean, just addressing this side of your question, Isabel. So this is something that honestly has weighed on me for a couple reasons. Number one, so my wife is of Chinese descent, and right outside, we're all working from home, fortunately, but there was a news article this week where right outside of her office, a pregnant woman of Asian descent was accosted. And that just took me back because, there's something about, someone carrying a child where that's just, assaulting, to read about and to hear about. And then you think about everything going on in the San Francisco area. On my team, there are folks of Asian descent as well that are going to be moving to the Bay Area in San Francisco as well. And I am concerned about, should they move here early? Should they wait till more people sort of come back to the city for their own safety? And so, I just say this because I don't have any answers. I definitely agree with everything that was said. But one of the things that's just important is also to reflect and make sure that you're in a good spot. And also not be afraid to reach out if to your support network, if you're feeling off or you recognize something, requires some discussion for yourself. So that's just my last 2 cents there. But thanks for bringing this up. It's a great question, great prompt.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing I would add here, and I don't know if I really have much to add, but I think it just comes down to empathy, right? I think it comes down to putting yourself in someone else's shoes and going, oh, hey, if you had to worry about your grandmother being stabbed at a bus stop, or if you had to worry about your father walking down the street and getting punched in the back of the head, how would that make you feel, right? And I think for a lot of people, I think having that sense of empathy, I think then leads into action, right? Action is sort of meaningless if you don't truly empathize and truly understand what's sort of happening here. Very similar to Jonathan, I remember, so for me, my dad works in South LA, where it's not the most glamorous neighborhood. It's definitely not the safest. And so as soon as I heard about this, it sort of made me think back to, oh man, well, how's my dad going to operate his shop? How are we going to be affected as a family? And I remember, personally for me, one of the hardest moments growing up was when I heard that my dad was held up at gunpoint in the shop in LA. And these sort of moments make you realize that it's not just a news story that you hear that this will never happen to me. This is not something, this is not for me, right? That's for those people on the news outlets. It very much could happen to you. But as much as we can, whatever the solution is, right? I wish I had more actionable insights, but at the end of the day, I just feel like it comes down to empathy, right? Like, no one really wants anything bad to happen to their parents. So what can you do to try to at least empathize and help support people around you to maybe take different actions or maybe help inform others?
You know, as Isabel, I'll just add one thing, a personal thing, right? I don't, you know, our audience, probably young or whatever. I have a son, right? I have a son and a daughter. My son is a sophomore. And I said, Jonathan and Jerry know, like he's becoming a big thing on TikTok or at his level, right? But there is so much of hate. You know how many? Let me tell you actually how many followers I have on TikTok. 2. The reason, and how many people I follow, maybe 5 or 10. I'm not on TikTok to make, you know, a big following. The reason is I follow him to see how many comments he's getting. There is so much of hate on how his terminal looks, on Corona stuff, on how his eyebrows look. He's got a beautiful unibrow. Love it, right? Like, why? Right? That impacts me as a parent. When this started happening, when Jonathan and Jerry, as they were sharing, you know, when he goes alone somewhere, I'm like, I'll go with you. It's so hard as a mom of color to think about it. I can tell you, it does impact me mentally as well. But can I do something about it? As I said, you can start empowering, you can start at your own level, at your family level, and then keep getting bigger and bigger, and to show them that, you know, there is a reason why we are like we are, and be proud of that. It's hard. If you ask me, Harpreet, are we all, the key is we need to be in this together, folks. Let's empower each and every one. Let's bring each other up versus, you know, oh my God, she's a nation too. Oh, you know, this is, Jonathan brought up a really good point, which I see so much. People bringing each other down from the same ethnicity. It happens in Indian culture a lot, right? When they see someone growing up, and I'm not saying it's bad or good, right? Let's bring each other. What I'm saying is let's keep lifting each other up. And I'll pause there, Isabel.
Thank you all for sharing. And I know as we wrap up this AAPI panel, I did want to ask just a couple of questions from the chat. And one of the questions that I thought was really insightful was, how do we lift and climb up and make sure that we fight for one demographic and not just only acknowledge the other groups, but also help bring them up as well? So how are we able to support other groups at the same time, while we also just talk about the rise of Asian hate crimes? And also at the same time, if you all want to chat upon any tips that you have for those who are struggling to embrace their heritage now, when growing up they were told to minimize their Asianness in order to fit in. So if any of you want to talk about either topic, I think that would be really valuable for our audience.
I saw a pause, so I'll go. You know, I think I added. I'll just reiterate the fact, and I didn't even talk. I didn't when I was talking about how we can help. I wasn't even talking about Asian Americans. That is the same thing you can do for Blacks, right? Our Gleam community, right? Our trans community, our you know, the other ethnic community, whatever it is, right? Like, you know, first of all, learn there is so much of information on internet. We are not living in the time when I was born, right? I'll age myself, right? I'm a Gen Y, right? Let's not go there, but whatever it is, right? Like, we are in this digital time world, and where you can learn. If you didn't know what was going on in 9/11, go learn, right? What's going on in Black, go learn. What's going on in Asian, go learn, right? So the key thing is, it starts from here. It starts from here. Learn, act on it, amplify. The word of mouth travels so fast, folks. I can tell you. I made a connection with the Vikram. He will tell 10 more people. I will tell 10 more people about Vikram. I will tell. It's that connection. You can do it, right? So do that. Act, acknowledge, and keep learning and growing. So that is one thing. And I think there was another question, Isabel, connected to that. Let me answer that, but I forgot. Again, to that point, I'm dyslexic, folks. I am proud of what I am. My disability, today is actually Global Disability Accessibility Awareness Day. I'm proud of who I am. So that's why I forgot. What was the second question? I'll ask Isabel to repeat it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And the question was, what are your tips for those who are struggling to embrace their heritage right now as an Asian American? When growing up, they were taught to minimize their Asianness in order to fit in.
So here's the take. I think I shared my story. 30 years of what? 30 years of trying to blend in. 30 years of being like a chameleon. What did I get? I was, to be very honest, even in consulting as well, I was growing. People were giving me what was Harpreet going to be doing next and next. But my career didn't blow up until and unless I said, this is what I bring to the table. These are the strengths, being very clear about these are the strengths I bring to the table, right? And also showing them this is going to be my learning path, right? 70-30, or, people talk about 50-30-20 model. We can talk about that in some other time. But find what is different in you. It's okay. I totally get it if you don't want to kind of shine on at this point. It's a journey again, one thing at a time. On that note, listen to my TEDx talk, which is coming tomorrow, and a plug there. And the topic is, it's never too late for personal branding. So I would say, listen to that. You will get an answer why if you're not ready to embrace, I actually talk about the great model and actionable steps, how you can try to stand out. I'm not going to give any more because I want you to go hear that.
That's awesome. Hard to follow that up. I'm not going to lie. I really did like Serena's question on sort of, we have, there has been an element of sort of suppressing our, background, our Asianness. And I don't know if it's tips or what, but, if you find yourself in an environment like that, here's what's worked for me, at least. I think, at the heart of things, humans are, we gravitate towards stories, and we gravitate to hearing about the experiences of others, and finding common connection in that. And so my one tip at the outset would be, how can you start to share some of your stories and your experiences with others? And not even in a sort of, maybe not necessarily in like a preachy way or anything like that, but it can even be, sort of lighthearted. We're a storytelling sort of humanity. And so, that's one thing that's been effective for me, is just sharing, what it's like to have an Asian mom, which I know plays into a bit of a stereotype, or my experiences with my mom as, somebody who immigrated to this country, or, these stories are, they bond us in many ways. The other thing I'll say is, at the end of the day, you do need to find people who do accept you for you. And if you consistently find yourself in an environment where you don't feel comfortable sharing, many of the elements of your personality, of your background, etc., there's oversharing, but there's a certain amount of authenticity you have to bring to your work, to your life. And if you consistently find yourself in an environment where you feel constrained and not able to share, my biggest tip is reevaluate your environment and find a place where you can be psychologically safe. At the end of the day, you can't necessarily change everybody, but you can change your own environment. And I know that's very tough. It's a really hard conversation, especially when you have a great paying job and on paper, it seems like you've ticked all the boxes for success. It is super challenging, but you will be limited in the long run. And it will affect your happiness if you consistently find yourself in that space. So Serena, I know that's probably not the exact tip you wanted, but that's a very real conversation I've certainly had to have with myself. So yeah, that's I'll pass it over to anybody else who wants to chime in here.
Yeah, I mean, to keep it short, like I would huge +1 to Vikram. Like, one of the things that I've quickly learned when I was recruiting, and I've interviewed for almost 30 tech companies now, is that it's very, very, very easy to spot the companies and the cultures where that you can't bring your whole self, and that people who are interviewing you have to put up sort of this front. And one of the things that I really value is I'm a pretty goofy guy. I like to laugh a lot. I like to smile a lot. I like to mess around a lot. And if there's a company where that sort of personality isn't welcome, I know for a fact I will not be successful there, right? No matter how much money I'm going to be making in the short term, long term, I know for a fact I will not be successful. And so that's one of the things I've learned, is that for you to be successful in your career, you genuinely need to be happy. For you to be happy, you need to be able to feel comfortable. For you to feel comfortable, you need to be in an environment where people love and care for who you truly are. And that's one of the things that I think I've learned, just interviewing and working at 2 different companies. There's 3.
Yeah, and I'll end it off by saying, be sure to reach out to folks that come from your similar backgrounds, that are in leadership positions. Like, when you see a lot of different corporate, the people on the corporate ladder nowadays, for a lot of the big companies, a lot of them come from, majority backgrounds, right? But there's always one person who comes from that minority background. Don't be afraid to reach out, because I think what happens is we'll self-reject ourselves and be like, I don't want to reach out. I don't think they're going to respond. But you honestly never know. Like, you never know. For a lot of our speakers here at Wonsulting, we just reach out to them and just ask, be like, hey, we'd love for you to speak to our amazing group of individuals who are looking to just gain insights and learn. And we have amazing people like Harpreet and Vikram here today that are these amazing folks in their respective companies. So what I love to say all the time is, if you never ask, you never know. And if you never ask, the answer is always no. So just reach out. The worst thing that can happen is no response. The best thing that can happen is you can find someone who comes from a similar background that you can actually look up to and will guide you to wherever you want to be in life, so you can turn from an underdog into a winner.
Thank you all so much again for coming on to this panel and for sharing your experiences and stories with us. I know I really learned a lot from each and every one of you, and I'm sure the audience members felt the same way again. And also for all our audience members, again, if you'd like to stay up to date on Wonsulting events and live streams, please head over to our website, wonsulting.com, to sign up for our newsletters so you don't miss out on anything. And again, a huge thank you to everyone who joined us today on our panel. And again, thank you so much again.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thanks for coming. See us.